Hello everybody, Ray Gamer here with the Failures Anonymous group, coming at you with this new style of video for the channel, apart from our usual shenanigans.
That was, oh my, wait, whoa, wait, why is somebody else DMKYT?
I want to talk about Radeon, and see just how bad it really is. Between 10 to 15 years ago, AMD was selling their HD 5000 to 8000 series cards, which got a nasty rap for having a lot of buggy and problematic drivers. Due to these bad drivers, ad campaigns and users crapped on AMD for having bad drivers, costing them a lot of sales for their Radeon GPUs, with most consumers choosing to go to Nvidia instead. I must admit, I was also in the same boat. Growing up, every computer I had ever owned, from my very first gaming computer, was always Nvidia. My first two computers were laptops with a GTX 1060 to an RTX 2060. I later on upgraded to an RTX 3070 laptop and built a desktop with a GTX 1080, which I eventually upgraded to a 4060 Ti, 8GB. My experience with Nvidia has been great, with hardly any issues whatsoever. Any issues I did have were solved very easily, and it was overall just a great experience. However, moving up from a 4060 Ti is difficult, considering the dollar per performance between the Nvidia cards and the AMD equivalents. It's hard for a lot of gamers to justify staying with Nvidia, besides the whole argument of Radeon drivers being bad. But if they're not as bad as they're made out to be, then what argument is there to stick with Nvidia? That is what we're going to try and figure out. Some people might say that Nvidia has things like DLSS and may perform better in ray tracing, which we'll discuss in a later video. But we're only here to talk about the quality of AMD's drivers for their hardware. And for the next 9 months, till December, we will see if Radeon is really as bad as people say it is. And at the end of the 9 months, I will reveal whether I decide to stick with AMD or switch back to Nvidia and why. I will share updates once a month or every couple months on my experience to give a proper long-term point of view. My goal was to buy the best AMD GPU I could for less than $200. What I ended up with was an Asus TUF RX 6700 XT OC edition. This video is being made after having this GPU for 2 weeks, and I want to share my experience with this GPU so far. There's a lot I want to cover, so let's get into it. I helped DMKYT build his own desktop PC not too long ago, and the GPU we first decided on was an XFX 6700 XT for the value and the 12GB of VRAM it offered. However, he began running into issues with the card, where games would randomly crash and stutter after a few days of use. At the time, I didn't know much about AMD and wasn't sure how to fix these issues. All I knew to do was to update the drivers, and after updating them, nothing changed. Beyond that, I wasn't sure what to do at the time. And seeing how our window to return the card was closing, and we were both anxious to get the PC up and running, we decided to switch to a more expensive RTX 4070 and returned the 6700 XT. However, I went ahead and bought one anyways, even after all that, to see if I ran into similar issues. When I installed the card, the first thing I did was install DDU, Display Driver Uninstaller, which is highly recommended whenever you upgrade or swap out your GPU. I then installed AMD's Adrenaline Edition app, which I will get into a bit later in the video, and I went ahead and got my drivers up to date. After all that, I ran a few benchmarks in 3D Mark and tuned the GPU to stable settings inside of the Adrenaline app and got pretty similar results to my 4060 Ti running the same tests. Although in the test for ray tracing, the 4060 Ti results were slightly higher, but before the Nvidia lovers start celebrating, keep in mind this Radeon card is a generation older and the difference was only about 9 FPS on average. I treated this GPU as if I hadn't changed a single thing. I went about my normal routine playing the same games I normally would have on the 4060 Ti to get the best point of view from a normal user because I'm what you would call normal. But I am the church! The games I've played on this GPU are Red Dead Redemption, Red Dead Redemption 2, Doom 2016, Fortnite, Cyberpunk, and Halo Infinite. However, I'm going to talk about what I found with Halo Infinite later in this video. All these tests were run in 1080p because that is the resolution of my monitor. Before we get into my first impressions of how the different games ran on this card, I want to briefly talk about AMD Adrenalin Edition software for their Ryzen and Radeon hardware. This software was a bit of a learning curve for me, coming from previously GeForce Experience, now the NVIDIA app, because that's a really cool name for your driver software controlling your super expensive cards. Thanks, NVIDIA. As I learned to use the app, I've grown to really love how featureful this app is for things like controlling what values you get to see with the heads-up display, whereas for NVIDIA you're limited to just basic or advanced, as well as built-in manual overclocking for both my CPU and GPU, and also the different settings Adrenalin has to offer to control the performance of your hardware while in game. I left most of these settings disabled since I wasn't sure what most of them were, but in a future video I will go deeper into these settings on this app and how it all works, including overclocking. After getting used to this app, I can't lie, I would find it hard to switch back to the NVIDIA app, even with that super cool and creative name. Now let's look at some different games and my first impressions of how they ran. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the game ran very smooth on high ultra graphics at around 80 FPS native. Nothing much to declare with this game. However, its older counterpart, Red Dead Redemption, I noticed a fair amount of stuttering in the game, especially when moving quickly, whether it be turning around or sprinting in game. There was a good bit of stuttering and lag. The game is forced to be capped at 144 FPS in settings, which is the highest the game settings will allow the game to run, and my GPU utilization was only at 70%, so I knew there had to be a setting causing the issue. So I began turning certain settings off one by one, both inside the game and the game settings built into AMD Adrenalin. Eventually, I turned off VSync in the actual game settings itself, and the game suddenly became smooth as butter. Both these games ran fine with no crashes or blue screens. In Doom 2016, I saw similar results to Red Dead Redemption 2. I was running all the same settings as my 4060 Ti, and the game ran perfectly smooth with no issues like stuttering or crashing, and was able to achieve an average FPS of 108 on high settings. Even though it is an older game, I was very happy with these results and had no trouble blowing up my enemies with a shotgun, since it reminds me of all the good times after eating a Taco Bell. In Fortnite, while playing with my girlfriend who carries me the whole round, I was getting about 160 FPS on average on higher settings, although my 1% lows were going down to 30-20 FPS, so there was a good bit of stuttering, especially when I was moving around a lot, similar to Red Dead Redemption. This time, however, VSync was not the issue here since I was still experiencing this issue even with the setting disabled. After doing some research, some people online had said that sometimes when enabling anti-input lag in the Adrenalin software, certain games that aren't GPU intensive may experience stuttering. Even though my GPU utilization was around 95%, I turned the setting off just to see if it would help. After turning this setting off, I noticed a huge improvement in my 1% lows, getting close to 140, which is more along the lines of what I want considering my average FPS. Moving on to Cyberpunk, God bless Keanu Reeves and his best movie of all time, Replica. This game is probably the most graphics intensive game on this list, and is one I purchased recently just to see how it runs on this card, since this game offers more graphical settings for ray tracing. With ray tracing, ray trace reflections, and ray trace local shadows enabled, and no active frame gen or upscaling, I was getting about 57 FPS average, which I thought was pretty good coming from a card that's a couple generations older. Now, I want to talk about Halo Infinite, because this is one of the games on this list that I play a lot with DMKYT. The reason I waited to talk about this game is because at this one, I ran into an issue where the game crashed on me. I was able to run around in Husky Raid, where the card ran perfectly fine with no issues, running at about 120 FPS average with no stuttering or any other performance issues on my first playtest with this card. However, once the round ended and I went to queue up another round, my game crashed. And then Adrenalin gave me an error that said a driver had timed out. But now, before you Radeon haters start typing away about how y'all were right all along and it would have never happened with NVIDIA, well, that just might not be true. Random crashes can happen from time to time. After having this card for 2 weeks and using it on a daily basis and even left the PC running for a couple hours straight, I've only ran into this one crash. Since then, I've had over 8 hours of gameplay with no issues, and the game ran great. And this is all on the same driver I was using when I launched the game the first time. All in all, I'm very happy with the performance in this game so far, and we'll see in a few months if I keep running into this issue. Now, let's cut to future me editing this video to talk about how it does while trying to edit a video, and if Radeon GPU built-in video encoders are as bad as people say they are.
Hey guys, Future Rig Gamer here. Real quick, I just want to talk about how the GPU handled DaVinci Resolve. So this video wasn't extremely intense to put a massive load on this machine, but the software ran great. It didn't lag or cause problems with me while trying to edit the video, and rendering the video at 1080p, it took less than 2 minutes to fully export. I think overall, it did pretty good for my needs. Now back to my cute younger self.
So far, my experience with this AMD GPU, though not perfect, has been really awesome. I can't wait to share my first update of my Radeon experience with you guys here soon. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more Failures Anonymous content coming soon. See you later.